because we are animated, and because we do things, at least in appearance, and because we think, we conclude that we somehow act independently. When this conclusion comes to you, it is at the heart of misunderstanding the nature of existence. Once we believe that we are the actor, we are the doer, we are the giver, the purveyor, we lose sight of Haqq, reality. The steps in Sufism are shari'at, tariqat, Haqiqat, and marifat. Haqiqat is when you begin finally to have some sight of reality as opposed to sight of only the illusory nature of things and our own perceived illusory involvement of things. So when we have some idea of reality and we spend some time contemplating reality, we see that we are not the movers. We are not the givers. We are dependent on the grace and the glory and the mercy and the compassion and the kindness and the love of our Lord in all that we do. It is said that Allah is in the constant maintaining and sustaining of this world and all of existence. And if He abandoned that maintaining and sustaining for an instant, all that is would disappear. But in His mercy and in His kindness and in His divinity and in His love, He does not abandon that maintenance and that sustenance. So, to understand the interaction of divinity with us, and to understand the nature of Allah's love for us, we have to understand that from existence to every instant of our existence, from the beginning through the entire span of our existence, it is His love that maintains it and sustains it. And every act that we do, every action that we do, every thought that we have, every move that is made because of His love an allowance of those acts to be. If he didn't allow it, it wouldn't happen. So we look at the world, and many people become incredibly frustrated when they look at the nature of existence. They see, and let's just go back for the past 100 years, they see a constant state of upheaval in various parts of the world where men are killing men, where men are at war with men. And war is an unbelievably aggressive situation where it becomes acceptable and necessary to kill hordes of people. If you don't kill them, you are somehow denigrating your duty to war. You are somehow less than honorable in the endeavor that you've been put into. Soldiers are meant and trained to kill. And it's funny because they have these rules of war. How you're allowed to kill people and how you're not allowed to kill people. The frustrating part comes from watching, and we can all watch these wars now on television, watching these wars and seeing people blown up and massacred. Now, if you watch history channels, you'll see the same thing happening in World War II. You'll see the same thing happening in World War I. You'll see the same thing happening in Vietnam. You'll see the same thing happening in Korea. You'll see the same thing happening in Cambodia. You'll see the same thing happening in Africa. There's a constant onslaught of devastation of this existence by man, because man feels that he somehow should rule this earth as opposed to God. And the biggest lie is that people do what they're doing on behalf of God, and therefore they are somehow doing what is appropriate in this devastation. So I was thinking about all of this going on, and I was thinking about personal circumstances and how many of us have touched the areas of destruction, been near the areas of destruction, been involved in areas of destruction, protested against areas of destruction, refused to enter areas of destruction. And yet we've all seen the accumulated deaths and the toll of people dying at the hand of man, as opposed to what the doctors call natural causes. And one of the things that came to me is that watching all of this destruction, it should become self-evident that this existence is impermanent, that this existence is temporary. And God's grace that gave us this existence doesn't end with this existence. It has been said that God has saved his greatest treasures for the next life, because he wasn't going to give you all of his treasures in this impermanent situation, in this temporary situation. So, when one becomes frustrated with existence, one should meditate on the fact that Allah has only apportioned a tiny fraction of his abundance to this world. And so much more is still available and still to be seen and still to be had by this creation, if we have the patience to allow it to occur. What are the things that stop that patience? What are the things that take us from a state of peace and contentment to a state that is full of anxiety and full of difficulty? Well, there is lust, intoxicants, falsehood, murder, and theft. Once we allow our being to want something other than being satisfied with divine love, we become lustful for things in the world. We become in a state of heated need. And in that state of heated need, lust, we are capable of doing things that are forbidden in order to satisfy that lust. And that's how murder and theft and falsehood come about. But the interesting thing is that because we have this lust for the world, we have become enamored with the small treasures that Allah has provided, and we block our way to the great treasures that are available to us because we mistook dung for diamonds. And in that mistake and in the repetition of that mistake, we decay our being so that the truth of the divine treasures that would be available to us are blocked by our own self-imposed blindness through our lust for the world. So, to get, you have to give up. To be allowed to enter, you have to give up. You have to give up what? You have to give up the lust for the world. And as the lust for the world stops, then there's no longer a need for intoxicants to self-medicate that lust. There's no longer a need for theft or falsehood or murder because you don't need those things. But the need for them, the want for them, brings about your own destruction. And on a worldwide basis, the same that acts on each individual acts in the world. When groups come together and begin screaming and lusting for the same things, they then become mobs. Mobs become countries. Countries become armies. And the will of that lust within the country, then, or within the mob, becomes what happens to the outer world and everybody that gets in its way. The Quran says that people will be governed by people similar to their own nature. Now, if you are dissimilar to the nature of most of the people in your country, and you find that the way you are being ruled is contrary to your own personal belief system, your own personal understanding of things, you have some choices. And of course it depends where you live. But these choices involve somehow altering your existence, not to allow it to get embroiled in the greater type of existence that seems to be going on all around you. So you need to pull back and disappear. Some people would say you need to become an activist and try to rail against the machinistic ways of what's going on. But from what I saw at the time I spent at the feet of my teacher, is we were cloistered. We were hidden. We were separated and segregated and taken away from most active involvement in what was going on in the world. The joys and sorrows and the intentions of the world, the joys and sorrows and intentions induced by the world were no longer the ones that captivated and activated us. We became captivated and activated in a different mode, in a different way, for a different intention. We understood that if we sat in the room with our teacher, a 25, 30 foot by 20 foot space, that was enough. And we had conquered a large enough portion of the world that we could find peace. And not just for ourselves, but for a few hundred people within that same tiny space. So, as we go through the world, as we go through our existence, how much do we need in order to be relieved of the lust for the illusory existence? There's a dilemma. We are part of it in that our body is part of this illusion. We live inside of it, and it needs to be sustained and maintained. And we have to do something about providing food and shelter for it. But what extent do we need to go to? What extent do we need to push and pull the reins of illusion? Can we find ourselves in a mode where what we do is done without a great amount of imposition? Can we find ourselves in a situation where we can flow easily through this illusion and provide what's our necessities? Or do we find that we have to struggle against what's provided for us so that things become difficult and there is upheaval in our own existence? We have to find this equilibrium. And if we don't understand the nature of the great giver, the nature of the great creator within all of this, and of the divine hand above all of this, then our struggles become insurmountable and never ending. There's the story of Solomon wanting to feed all the animals in the world, and Allah gave him permission to feed the fish for one day. And Solomon brought all of the stores that he had collected to the shore to feed the fish. And one fish came out of the ocean, and Solomon ordered all of his aides to feed this fish. And they began pushing all of the stores they had collected. And the fish ate and ate and ate. And soon Solomon was left with almost nothing. And he began to wail, "My God, where did such a large fish come from?" And then Gabriel came with an infinitesimal, non-atomic drop of Allah's grace and gave it to the fish, and the fish was satisfied. And then after Solomon saw this, he asked the fish about his size and that he must be the largest creature in existence. And the fish said, "No, I have 70,000 brothers and sisters, each 70,000 times larger than me. And my mother is 70,000 times larger than the largest one of us. And my father is 70,000 times larger than my mother." And it was the one drop of God's grace that satisfied the fish. Well, if we are incapable of swallowing God's grace, we are going to be incapable of becoming satisfied. Now, lust can't be satisfied. It reemerges. It's like the nine-headed monster, that every time you cut one off, 3 more come up. The world can't satisfy you. That's the nature of it. Now, that doesn't mean that people understand that the world can't satisfy you. They just keep trying to get satisfied by it. But there is no satisfaction within it. It is incapable of permanence. It's incapable of doing something that's long lasting. Only God's grace can bring that satisfaction. Only God's love can bring that satisfaction. And only when we allow ourselves to be integrated into that love and have the action and intention of that love can we become satisfied. And when that action and intention is taken on, we become different than who we were. And if we are in a phase in our existence where we refuse to change, we cannot recognize that love, and we cannot recognize the power of it because we're too busy chasing whatever it is we're lusting for. Divine love exists in us when we exist without lust. Divine love exists in us when we exist without intoxicants, without murder, without falsehood, without thievery. When we are at rest and at peace and no longer need to push existence to alter it to our idea of the way it should be and to our idea of what it is that we need in order to survive. And it's only then that real freedom comes to us. And when real freedom comes to us, our circumstances do not portray our freedom. Just to the ones who have eyes who only see circumstances does it portray our freedom. But to the ones whose eyes don't see circumstances but see qualities, an entirely different vision is seen. And when we go beyond seeing circumstances into seeing qualities, we have an entirely different vision of existence. And it's within that vision of existence that we can attach ourselves to the Haqiqat, to the truth, to the elevated state beyond the illusion of existence. And then we ride the wave of Allah's permanence as opposed to riding the wave of the world's illusion. May that become our touchstone. May that become our understanding. May that become that which we set our intention for, and may Allah fulfill that intention. Ameen, Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen.